Hi, it's John. Welcome to my channel EV Intuition, where I help you understand about electric vehicles. Today I'm going to answer the most common question I've received over the last several years as an EV owner from non-EV owners, and that is, how long does it take to charge your vehicle? So let's get to the answer to that question. So the question is, how long does it take to charge an EV? And the reason why people ask this question is they know it is a lot different answer than that of refueling a gas vehicle. Now let's think about a gas vehicle. Typically a gas vehicle has a gas tank that runs anywhere between 10 gallons and 20 gallons. So you can say that the average gas tank is around 15 gallons. And the gas pumps that you go to have a maximum speed of 10 gallons per minute. So everybody knows that it only takes 1 or 2 minutes to fill up your gas tank at a gas station. But they don't know how long it takes to charge an electric vehicle. And the reason for that is that there are many factors involved in determining how long it takes to charge an EV. One thing we can safely say is that this is one of the disadvantages of owning an electric vehicle. The refueling time, that is, compared to a gas vehicle refueling its gas tank to the time to charge an electric vehicle, is a lot different. And the electric vehicle is a lot slower. But to go back to the question, how long does it take? I think most people think I can give them a simple answer. And what I'd like to say is, it depends. And the reason why I like to say that is because the charging time of an electric vehicle depends on the charging speed. And that charging speed is dependent on several different items. So we're going to talk about those items today and hope that this will answer the question for you and help you understand what impacts the charging time of an electric vehicle. Before I get into the different items that impact the charging time of an electric vehicle, I think it's important to point out or review, in case you're not aware, some terminology in the electric vehicle world. The first term that I want to make sure everybody's aware of is called state of charge. Now, state of charge is just the percentage of charge in your electric vehicle's battery. I think of it, most people are familiar with the little battery icon on their cell phone, their smartphone. It's very analogous to that, except it represents the battery charge in your electric vehicle. So a state of charge of 10 means 10% of your battery is charged, and so on. The next term that's very important to understand, since we're talking about charging speed, because once we know the charging speed, we can determine the charging time. So the key is charging speed for electric vehicle is really a measure of power, and that is done in units referred to as kilowatts. Now, another thing to realize is that the power, or the charging speed, measured in kilowatts, is equal to the voltage times the current. So, as an example, for my Tesla Model Y, my charger is running at 240 volts, and it is pulling 40 amps of current. So, the power, or the charging speed, for that charger is 9.6 kilowatts. And that's just important terminology to know. The higher the number of kilowatts, the faster you're charging. So you want, ideally, a high number. The higher you can get, the better it is, the quicker it is, the less time it will take to charge your vehicle. The last term that I want you to make sure you're familiar with is energy. Your battery takes a certain amount of energy. And that energy is measured in what's referred to as kilowatt hours, abbreviated kWh. Kilowatt hours is the unit of measure that tells how much energy your home has used. If you go down to your electric meter, or wherever it is, in your garage or in your basement, you could see on that meter, it measures that amount of energy in kilowatt hours. In the same way, your battery has a capacity measured in kilowatt hours. For example, my Model Y is a 75 kilowatt hour battery. So the nice thing about kilowatt hours, and we've just previously talked about power or charge speed measured in kilowatts, is that if you take the charging speed in kilowatts and multiply it by the time in hours, you will get the amount of energy. For example, if I take the 9.6 kilowatts that my charger is running at, and I multiply it or charge my vehicle by 8 hours of charge time, I get 76.8 kilowatt hours of energy, which is roughly the size of my battery. So if my battery was empty at zero state of charge, in approximately 8 hours, it will fully charge to the 75 kilowatt hours of energy that that battery needs to have in order to be at 100%. Now that we've got some terminology down, let's get back to the question of how long does it take to charge an electric vehicle. As I said, the key thing that we need to know is charge speed, because if we know the charge speed, then we can calculate how long it's going to take to charge the vehicle. Well, the thing about an electric vehicle is that the charge speed is dependent on several different items. And let's talk about those. The first is the charger itself. Where are you charging it? What type of charger it is? And we'll get into that. The next is the vehicle being charged. Vehicles vary on how they handle and what charge speeds they can handle. The third item is the state of charge. How are you charging from 0 to 100, or from 20 to 80, or from 30 to 90? That also plays into the factor of how long is it going to take to charge. And the last thing that's important to keep in mind is temperature does affect the charging speed when charging an electric vehicle. So let's take the first item, which is really the biggest factor in charge speed, and that's related to the charger itself. The key thing to know about electric vehicles is there's really two main types of chargers: AC chargers and DC fast chargers. Now, AC chargers tend to be the slower chargers. They're found in your home and in public places like parking lots, parking garages, or other places of business that allow you to charge while you're at that facility. DC fast chargers are typically found on expressways because they're used when you're on the go and you need to get the most amount of charge speed so that you spend the least amount of time charging. Now, we talked about the key thing is charge speed. And if you know, AC chargers are really come in two different types: level 2 and level 1. Level 1 are very simple chargers that run on 120 volts, your basic house voltage. The problem is they can only deliver a power rating or a charge speed of 1 to 3 kilowatts. Most AC chargers that you find in homes for fully electric vehicles and in public charge locations tend to be the level 2, which operate on 240 volts. And they deliver anywhere from 6 to about 19 kilowatts of power or charging speed. Remember what we said: the higher the number in the charging speed, the better, the less time required to charge your vehicle. So you can see that for AC chargers, level 2 are the ones you probably want to have. Somebody can ask the question, well, why don't we put a DC fast charger in your home and not deal with the slow speeds? The problem is homes have limitations about the amount of energy that is delivered to them. Typically, I know in my area, 240 volts is delivered to my home, and most homes here have a limit of 200 amps. So, and there's other electric appliances in your house that need to run on them besides your electric vehicle charger. So it is impractical to put a DC fast charger into your home. That's why DC fast chargers are not as common as the AC chargers. DC fast chargers can have a charge rate of 50 to 350 kilowatts. That's significantly higher than your home chargers or your level 2 AC chargers. But they're pulling anywhere from 400 to 800 volts and hundreds of amps of current in order to reach those power levels. And those are typically found on the expressways, as I said, because those are the ones that you want when you're going on road trips. So you can see that a very big, important part of asking the question, how long does it take to charge? It really depends on what type of charger you're using. Are you using a DC fast charger, or are you using an AC level 1 or level 2 charger? The last thing that I wanted to mention about chargers, and is in particular public chargers, that you have to be aware of on occasion, is that some chargers, they have adjacent chargers tied to the same power supply, so that if you have two vehicles charging on adjacent chargers, you're going to start sharing the power between those two chargers. For example, I was once at a charger and I started charging and I realized, wow, the charge rate here is pretty slow. And then I realized once the vehicle next to me disconnected, suddenly the charge rate went up because those two chargers were pulling power from the same source and sharing power between two different chargers. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you ever pull into a public charge location and you're not sure if they share power and there's plenty of spots open, move somewhere else, not close to somebody already charging. Move to a charger that's at least a couple chargers away. The next important item that affects the charging rate is the vehicle itself. Vehicles have certain specifications that limit the charge rates. As you recall, we talked about two different chargers that you can connect to your vehicle, AC and DC fast chargers. For a vehicle, it has limits on both. What is the top AC charging rate that it can handle? And what is the top DC charging rate that it can handle? For example, my Model Y has a limit of about 11.5 kilowatts. That's the top charge rate that you can get out of an AC charger. If you had an AC charger that delivered more, this vehicle wouldn't handle anymore. So you have to match your charger, home charger, with the limitations of your vehicle, or make sure that you're aware of those limitations. Other vehicles sometimes vehicles are limited to 9.6 kilowatts. So that's important to keep in mind. Know the limits that your vehicle handle on AC and on DC. For example, my Model Y can handle up to 250 kilowatts on a DC fast charger. Other vehicles, for example, a Chevy Volt, has limitations of less than 100 kilowatts of energy. So very important to know what your vehicle maximum power ratings or charging speeds are in order to determine how long is it going to take to charge your vehicle. The other important thing to recognize about vehicles and their DC charge characteristic is something referred to as the charge curve. Now, a charge curve shows the maximum amount of charge that it can take at each state of charge. And I'm showing you a picture of a charge curve, and notice how, and in general, this is how most charge curves are. They deliver kind of the maximum power sort of at the lower end of the state of charge. And then as the state of charge approaches 100%, you can see that the maximum charge rate drops. So that's an important thing to know about DC fast chargers and your vehicles. The DC fast charger can deliver a maximum amount of power, but your vehicle will only take certain amounts depending on its current state of charge. And each vehicle has a different charge curve related to DC charging. And the key point about that is that the charge curve shows that the maximum power that your vehicle will accept decreases as the state of charge approaches 100. Kind of a rule of thumb that electric vehicle owners know is that when you're charging at DC fast chargers, you rarely charge to 100%. Why? Because the amount of time to charge, let's say from 10% to 80%, can be less than the amount of time it takes to go from 80% to 100%. So if you're on a road trip and you're trying to save time, what you want to do is charge as quickly as possible and then move on and get back on the road. So that's one of the important concepts to know about an electric vehicle that is totally different than a gas vehicle. When you're filling a gas tank, the gas pump is just going to keep pumping at the maximum rate just to the end. Boom. On an electric vehicle, on a DC fast charger, it's going to vary as the state of charge increases. The other thing to know, given the charge curves, is, well, what happens with AC chargers? In general, AC chargers are pretty much constant. If you're charging your vehicle at home on an AC charger, let's say at 9.6 kilowatts, it pretty much stays at that rate until it gets very close to 100%. Then the vehicle will probably slow it down as it approaches 100% state of charge. The other thing to know is that the charge curves of vehicles vary quite a bit from one vehicle to the next. And I've shown you here several different vehicle charge curves here that show you how they differ. Now, another thing that I want to point out about vehicle attributes is the battery size. As you might imagine, vehicles differ in the size of the battery. For example, in the Ford F-150 Lightning pickup truck, you have a battery that's over 120 kilowatt hours, whereas my Tesla Model Y, it's 75 kilowatt hours. So given that, you know that the bigger the battery size, the longer it's going to take to charge that vehicle. The last thing that I want to point about, and it's a difference between different vehicles, is that charging a vehicle is optimal at a certain temperature. And we're going to get into that in a little more in a minute. But the thing that I want to talk about relative to the vehicle is that the vehicles sometimes vary on their battery thermal management. And what is battery thermal management? It's the property of the vehicle, capability of the vehicle to keep the battery at an optimal temperature so that it gets the optimal range, and more importantly, as we're talking about charging, to get the optimal charging speed. So some vehicles have better battery thermal management than others. And by having a better battery thermal management system, they will have a better charge rate. For example, Teslas have a very good battery management system. And if they know, or you indicate that you're heading to a charger, they will start what's referred to as conditioning the battery. In other words, making sure the battery temperature when you reach the charger is at the optimal temperature so that you'll get the fastest charging speed. Many vehicles have this. Some are more automatic. Others you'll have to manually start the battery conditioning prior to charging. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at electric vehicles. The next item that I indicate here that impacts the charging speed is what I refer to as the beginning and end points of your state of charge. For example, the time that it takes to go from 10 to 50% state of charge will differ quite a bit from going from 50 to 90% state of charge. And that's something to keep in mind when you're charging. Your best charging speeds will occur at lower states of charge, depending on the charging curve, but in general, that's a true statement, than at the upper end of the state of charge, because the vehicle needs to have the battery slow down the amount of energy going into it as it approaches 100% state of charge. That's something to keep in mind when you're charging a vehicle and is necessary in helping answer the question, how long does it take to charge a vehicle? One important point to know relative to this state of charge endpoints is that this really only varies in DC fast charging. This is not something you need to worry about with AC chargers. As I've mentioned, AC charge rates stay pretty constant until you get very close to 100%. But DC fast chargers charge rates vary quite a bit along that state of charge curve. The last item that affects the charge rates of electric vehicles, and it's important to know about, is temperature, and mainly the temperature extremes. When it gets very cold, in what I define as very cold, let's say around the freezing point or colder, temperatures like that can impact how quickly your vehicle will be able to charge. And the same is true at temperatures when they get to the extremely high temperatures, which I define as in 90 or above degrees Fahrenheit. Once again, this will have a negative impact on charge speeds. And as I've mentioned before, vehicles are equipped with a battery thermal management system to try to keep the battery temperature at the optimum. But if your battery was sitting out in the cold or in the heat and you suddenly want to plug it in and begin charging, you will notice a degradation in that charge speed from the normal. And so that's why vehicles have this battery management system in it, so that if you can anticipate when you're going to charge, it will use some of the energy in the battery to get the battery at the optimum temperature prior to you charging. That way, once you get to the charger or begin charging, it's going to deliver the fastest charging speed that it can. This also points out something to keep in mind, that a lot of times people say it's best to keep vehicles in cold or hot temperatures away from the elements. In other words, if you have a garage at home, it's better to park your electric vehicle in the garage to keep it away from temperatures that get very cold at night or even during the day in some areas. And the same thing is true with the hot temperatures. If you can keep your vehicle out of the sun or in the shade, protected by a garage or some other structure that'll keep it cooler, that will also go a long way in helping improve your charging speeds. So now that I've covered all the different items that impact charging speed, we can hopefully now answer the question, how long does it take to charge your vehicle? And as you've realized from this discussion, it's not a simple answer, because it needs other additional factors in it. Like, well, what type of charger am I going to charge it at? What is the current state of charge of the vehicle, and how much am I going to charge it to? And what temperature is it currently where the vehicle is parked? Those are things that we've learned today that impact charging and make that answer to that question, not a simple one. As I mentioned before, I'd like to say to people when they ask me, well, it depends. But I try to give them a quicker, shorter version of it. And what I end up with, as you can see from this chart, I'm showing you a chart that shows Tesla Model Y that I have relative charge times on the 3 different types of chargers that we had talked about, the AC level 1, level 2 chargers, and the DC fast charger. This gives you some approximation of how long does it take. And as you can see from the DC fast charger, and I said really just going from 0 to 80%, it takes a little over half an hour to do that. Whereas at the AC level 2 charger, it takes roughly 8 hours to charge. Now this is charging from 0 to 100%. And if I had a level 1 charger working at 15 amps, 120 volts, it can take almost a couple days to fully charge the vehicle. I hope this gives you some appreciation about what it takes and how long it takes to charge an electric vehicle. And I hope you've learned all the different factors involved in this. If you like my content here, I'd ask you to please subscribe. I'm going to have more information coming. I consider charging time a disadvantage of an electric vehicle compared to a gas vehicle. I'm going to continue on my series of some of the disadvantages of electric vehicles compared to gas vehicles. I've already done a series on electric vehicle advantages. Please check them out and give me a like, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.